So photography can be used as a tool to inspire. Inspire someone to go somewhere, to try something, to do something. But what if photography could be used more than just a tool to inspire someone to go somewhere or do something? What if it could be a tool to empower someone to find value in their story, in their background, their upbringing? What if people felt empowered enough, felt valued enough to share their own story? What would that look like? Hi guys, my name is Kelsey, and today I want to talk to you about photography and how that can be used in the lives of people who have forgotten the impact of their stories. So today I want to cover a couple of things. I want to talk about the importance of sharing stories, the difference between telling someone's story for them versus them telling their own story, and how photography can be used to empower people to share their stories. So first, a little bit about me. I picked up my first big girl camera when I was a senior in high school. My photo teacher's name was Mr. Shaw. He was about 6'4", big man, long beard, long hair, and I was absolutely terrified of him. We would sit in class for about 5 minutes where he would take attendance, and then he would send us on our way throughout the campus to take pictures. It was about 25 high schoolers with zero photography experience and an hour to goof around. The goofing around started to get pretty serious though when Mr. Shaw informed us that once a week we'd have to stand up in front of the entire class with a slideshow of our week's best photos and present it to the class. And this absolutely terrified me. And yet this big, scary man was kind to me, and he encouraged me, and he encouraged my photography. And though I think I dreaded every moment the entire semester that I had to stand up in front of my class and show my pictures, I haven't set down my camera yet. So flash forward to today, I am a nearly graduated journalism student with an emphasis in visual media. And though truthfully I dread every single moment, I still have to stand up in front of people and share my photos. Every time I do, and every time I see others share, I grow more and more passionate about the process of being vulnerable in our work, and oftentimes our own story. For me, photography has been a place that creates a creative space for me, and it facilitates my passion for social justice, for people and their stories. And that truly is what I'm passionate about, people and their stories. So why is sharing stories important? If there's one thing I've learned at Biola, it's that everyone has a story. Heart-wrenching stories and empowering stories and incredible stories. And we walk by people every single day, and we sit down next to the same person every day who has lived a life that we could never imagine, and we have absolutely no idea. So first off, sharing stories is so important because we all have one, every single one of us. And you may think that you don't have a story or that your story is insignificant, and you wouldn't be the only one. I was raised in an amazing and really simple family, and every single trial and hardship and story that I have, I feel like it's so insignificant compared to the ones I hear that I feel like it's not worth telling. And I've always felt really convicted when I was told to get up and share my testimony because I felt like I didn't have one. But we all have one. And we're all living this life and have been given stories by God for specific reasons. And those reasons are they help us relate to one another and they help us understand one another. And when we share our stories, it's such a gift because it unites us all. Sharing stories is so valuable because it can empower people. When you tell someone your story, when someone listens to your story, that automatically gives that person and that story a sense of value just by saying it and just by someone listening to it. And that's something that's so powerful. This is something that I really learned at a past internship that I had. I interned at an organization called Crochet Kids International. They're a nonprofit organization, and essentially they work with women in Uganda and Peru. They teach them how to create products like scarves and gloves and shirts, and then they sell them here in the US. And they provide these women with a fair wage, and they give them an education. And it's kind of like a business education. So eventually they can graduate from this Crochet Kids program, and they continue to provide for themselves and for their families. While I was there, I was a social media and communications intern, and I was lucky enough to work really closely with the stories of a lot of these women. And I was able to see the written transcripts, and I would put those in blogs and on their social media. And each of these women were given a profile online and a platform to tell their stories, and they called this Stories of Change. So each of these women could share where they had come from, what the program had done, and gratitude for this program. And one of the most amazing things to me was watching these women and their stories, and watching those stories change the way people interacted with that company. And once these women, they began to hold their stories so valuable that they believed that sharing those stories would make a difference in their own lives, in the people who were listening, and even in their communities. And the really awesome thing is that it did make a difference. And their stories are something that makes this company so unique. And it makes people want to buy because they know that there are real people behind it with real stories. And oftentimes, these women had really difficult pasts and really difficult stories. And what I learned, this process all taught me the value of being heard. These women had such difficult pasts, something that I feel would be so difficult to share. And these women were given the opportunity, were given a platform to share, and over again they took it. And they told these difficult stories, and they wanted to be heard, and they wanted people to listen. And when we listen, it makes a difference. And when we share, it makes a difference. Sharing our stories make a difference. My whole life, I've been inspired by storytellers, people who tell stories and tell them well. Whether it's a filmmaker or a photojournalist or my parents or friends, people who can tell me stories and make me laugh or cry or think really hard. And while I still think that all of these matter, lately I've been thinking, what if we could find a way to empower people to tell their own story so that other people didn't have to tell it for them? Because really, who can tell their own story better than themselves? And I would say that there is a difference between telling someone's story for them and someone telling their own story. When someone shares their own story, they're enforcing with their own words that their story is important, that it matters, and that it can make a difference. And it really is amazing to see the change that is created in people when they realize that what they have to say matters and what has happened in their past actually matters. An organization that has really influenced me when I consider what I want to do with my future is an organization called 100 Cameras. So this organization works within marginalized communities all around the world. They've had programs in South Sudan, India, Cuba, and essentially they give children tools to express themselves through photography. And they allow them to interact with their environment and ultimately become agents of change within their community. They have a curriculum that teaches these students basic photojournalism skills, and then they turn those photo stories into sellable products. And that profit goes directly into their community needs. So one example of this is one of their very first programs. It was in South Sudan. It was in 2008, and they went into an orphanage. And this was a time when South Sudan had a lot of war going on, and there were refugees, and it was a very violent time. So they went into their orphanage, and the orphanage said that their biggest community needs were they needed medicine, they needed a fence around the orphanage, and they needed transportation. So they gave these children some cameras and some basic knowledge and told them to go take some pictures. So these are just a few examples of the pictures. And at least to me, they're so life-giving, because even though you can't even tell that they're in this war-torn area, but it's simply a child's perspective that we would miss out completely if someone who hadn't asked them to do it. So this alone raised $19,000 for this community, which blows my mind. $19,000 just by giving a group of kids cameras to take pictures. And through that, these children were able to affect their community and provide medicine, build a fence around their campus, and to provide transportation for food and medicine. And that just shows how we can use these kind of models to really create change. So this model integrated both artistic education and community development. And it taught these students at such a young age that they had the skills and the power to transform the world around them. And that power can lie directly in their stories and in their perspectives. So how can this relate to our communities? For me, it was really easy to see how this could go off in a third world country. But it's more difficult to think how this can apply to us here. I was really fortunate to be able to experience a model similar to this at my home church. I'm originally from Sacramento, California, and I've been attending a church called Bayside Midtown. So Midtown is essentially located directly in the middle of Sacramento. And they're surrounded by homelessness and poverty and violence, and the people in the church are all from such different walks of life, and it's really cool, and it gives them such an amazing platform to be able to do ministry and outreach to people who really need it and to this really hurting community. So one woman from our church, she has a really passionate heart for photography and for social advocacy. So she started to implement a program similar to the one that I just talked about. She wanted to make a program for students in the urban communities surrounding the church that they could learn basic photography skills. So she went and she started to do this and taught them basic things like what is shutter speed and aperture and rule of thirds. But more importantly, they were taught that they could use this camera to share their story. And they could use this opportunity to share their perspective. And for the first time, a lot of these students were told that what they had to say mattered and that their perspectives mattered. Each student was given a camera and a chance to share. And similar to 100 cameras, they held an auction at the end of this and auctioned off student photos and also made, number one, a lot of money. Number two, just amazing results watching children be able to have ownership over something and actually create an impact, not even just for their own lives, but for their community around them. And that was really, really powerful to watch. These types of creative outlets are so important, especially for urban communities. And it's been said over and over again that extracurriculars are so important for children in these types because it can give them a creative outlet, and it often gives them something stable when their lives are not stable and often chaotic. The effects of poverty have been known to hinder a student's performance in school and also negatively affect their mental and their physical health. But being able to work with students at a young age with these types of things and teaching them how to express their frustrations and emotions and also create a space where they're able to explore their thoughts and goals and perspectives on life, it can give students motivation and a sense of self-worth. And especially using photography in this way can provide them with a sense of ownership over something that they actually made, created, and they can see the benefits from that. And ownership is such a powerful tool to help people realize their potential. And I think that photography can provide them with that ownership. As Christians, I think that we need to learn to teach people that their voices and their perspective matter, no matter what their backgrounds are or their circumstances. And we need to learn how we can amplify the voices of the people around us, empowering them to share their stories and continue this cycle of storytelling. And that's exactly what I want to do in my future. I want to be able to incorporate my love for photography and for people's stories, and to be able to find ways to empower people to share their stories because they're so important. And I think that Biola has enabled me to do this really well because I've been able to see how stories can transform people and the power of story, and that every single person has a story. I've been able to see how stories can change things. And not by our own power, but by the fact that we have a mighty and loving God who gives us these stories for a purpose, and that purpose is to be change makers in His name. So that's all that I have for you guys today, but I would love to open it up to any questions that you may have.